I can still remember that day, the day everything changed. I was a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in a small town in Ontario, where life moved at a steady, comforting pace. I had always believed that my life was defined by caring for others, and my days were filled with routine rounds, gentle smiles, and quiet determination. But that morning, as the hospital hummed with its usual energy, I felt a shift, an undercurrent of emotion that I could not ignore. My name is not important, but my role as a nurse is, for it is in those long, tireless shifts that I learned to balance compassion with duty. That day, as I moved through the corridors checking on patients, I was unaware that fate had already set a new course for me. I had been assigned to care for Evelyn, a soft-spoken woman whose terminal illness had cast a long shadow over her home. Evelyn was known for her warm smile, even in the face of pain, and the gentle way she thanked every nurse who cared for her. But it was not Evelyn who stirred something deep within me that day. It was her husband, Nathan. I first noticed Nathan by Evelyn's bedside. He was sitting quietly, his face drawn with exhaustion and grief. His eyes, red-rimmed and full of sorrow, were fixed on a faded photograph he held in trembling hands. I approached him, offering the kind of comforting words I had perfected over years of practice. "He's here for you," I had said softly, referring to the support available at the hospital. Yet, as I spoke, I sensed that his pain ran deeper than any words could express. Nathan's presence was both fragile and magnetic. In the silence that followed, our conversation began with small talk, a comment on the drab winter outside, a mention of the long night shifts. But slowly, his tone shifted. His voice grew softer, laden with a sorrow I had seldom heard before. As I helped him add just the pillows by Evelyn's bed, our hands brushed ever so slightly. In that fleeting moment, something unspoken passed between us, a spark of connection that I wished I could ignore. It was as if his grief had unlocked a hidden door in my heart, revealing a part of me that had always longed for something more than just the routine of care. I tried to dismiss the stirring inside me. I reminded myself that I was a nurse first, a professional dedicated to healing, not to blurring lines. Yet, every time Nathan's eyes met mine, every soft word he uttered, it felt as though the barrier between duty and desire was beginning to crumble. I left Evelyn's room that day with a heavy heart, burdened by the weight of emotions I had never expected to feel. I questioned whether my compassion for a grieving husband had ignited something forbidden, something dangerous. That charged, fateful moment lingered in my mind as I walked the quiet hallways. It was the seed of an inner conflict, a battle between the unwavering call of professionalism and the pull of a desire I had always thought was impossible. I knew deep inside that the connection with Nathan was not just a moment of shared sorrow, but the start of something that could change everything in my life. As I passed by the large windows overlooking the snow-covered landscape of Ontario, I wondered if I was on the brink of a path from which I could never return. And so began a journey into a realm of forbidden feelings. A journey that would force me to confront my beliefs and challenge the very essence of who I thought I was. Little did I know, the simple act of caring for a husband in grief would lead me down a road filled with temptation, heartache, and consequences I could never have imagined. Every day since that first encounter, I found my thoughts drifting back to Nathan. It was as if a small, persistent flame had been lit inside me, one that I tried desperately to ignore, yet it grew stronger with each passing moment. I told myself that I was simply moved by his grief, that the sadness I saw in his eyes was nothing more than a call for comfort. But deep down, I knew that there was something else stirring, a forbidden desire that went far beyond compassion. My routine at St. Mary's Hospital became a battleground of conflicting emotions. I would care for Evelyn with all the professional tenderness expected of me, yet every time I passed by Nathan's waiting room, my heart would pound in my chest. I began to notice the way his eyes lingered on me as I walked by, a soft and quiet look that seemed to say he was just as lost as I felt. I tried to brush off these glances as the simple expression of his grief, but as the days turned into weeks, they became harder to ignore. There were moments when the hospital corridors felt too narrow, the sterile lighting too bright, as if everything around me was pushing me to confront the truth inside me. I found myself counting the minutes until I could see Nathan again, eagerly awaiting any excuse to speak with him. One evening, after my shift had ended, I lingered near the family waiting area. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, a kind word, a shared moment of understanding, or simply a glimpse of his sorrowful smile that seemed to hold so much unspoken promise. That night, as I was leaving the hospital, I caught Nathan sitting alone in the lobby. The weight of his loneliness was almost tangible in the quiet space. He looked up as I passed, his eyes meeting mine in a way that made my breath catch. "Thank you for being here," he said softly, as if he had been waiting for me to hear him. I didn't know what to say. His words were so simple, yet they carried the heavy burden of a shared secret. In that fleeting moment, our connection felt both dangerous and deeply comforting. I began to search my mind for reasons to justify my growing attraction. I told myself that I was simply providing the care and compassion that every grieving person deserves. But the more I tried to suppress my feelings, the more I found them lurking behind every smile and every touch. A hand on my shoulder as I add Justin 4 drip, a brief brush of our fingers when handing over a medication. Each contact, no matter how small, sent shivers through me. I started to imagine what it might be like if those small moments could blossom into something more, something that would fill the void in both our hearts. Late nights at home were the hardest. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation with Nathan, every look, every hesitant smile. I felt a constant pull toward him, an attraction that was as thrilling as it was terrifying. I knew that giving in to these feelings could break more than just the unwritten rules of our professional lives. It could shatter families and alter destinies. Yet the allure was undeniable. In quiet moments, I even fantasized about a life where we could escape the burdens of duty and pain, where two broken souls could find solace in each other. There were times during my shifts when I felt as if I was walking a tightrope. One small misstep could send me plunging into a chasm of regret and guilt. I would often catch myself wondering, was it the loneliness of my own life that made me crave this connection, or was it something deeper, a need to feel desired, to feel alive in a way I hadn't felt before? The lines between professional care and personal longing began to blur in my mind, leaving me with a persistent question that I could not answer. One particular afternoon, as I checked on Evelyn, I noticed Nathan lingering outside her room longer than usual. He seemed to hesitate at the doorway, as if he wanted to speak but was too afraid of breaking the silence. When our eyes met across the corridor, there was a moment of unspoken understanding. I saw a glimmer of hope mixed with despair in his gaze, and I realized that he, too, was struggling with feelings he believed were forbidden. That day, I left the hospital with a heavy heart and a mind swirling with conflicted emotions. I was caught in a dangerous dance between duty and desire. I knew that every shared glance, every accidental touch, was drawing us closer to a point of no return. And yet, as the winter winds howled outside and the snowy streets of our small Ontario town glistened under streetlights, I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to change. In the silence of my apartment, I questioned whether I could continue living with this secret. The forbidden desire was no longer just a spark. It had become a raging fire, one that threatened to consume everything in its path. I was on the brink of a journey that promised both passion and pain, and deep inside, I wondered if I was ready to face the consequences of my own heart's rebellion. I can still recall the day when the fine line between professionalism and personal desire began to blur beyond recognition. It started with small, seemingly insignificant moments, an extra glance in the corridor here, a brief brush of our hands there, that slowly built into something far more dangerous and exhilarating. I found myself counting the minutes until I could see Nathan again, and the hospital corridors transformed from sterile hallways into secret passageways to a hidden world of forbidden passion. After a particularly long shift one cold winter evening, I lingered in a quiet corner of the hospital, a place where the echoes of footsteps and hushed conversations masked my inner turmoil. I was surprised to find Nathan there, sitting on a worn-out bench near the reception area. His eyes, dark and intense in the dim light, met mine with an unspoken invitation. The gravity of his sorrow seemed to mix with a longing that mirrored my own. Without exchanging a word, we both knew that something had changed. That night, as I closed the door behind me on another exhausting day, I felt as if I were stepping into a realm where every heartbeat carried the risk of discovery. In the seclusion of my modest apartment, I replayed the encounter over and over. The way his voice had trembled when he said, "I needed to see you," echoed in my mind. I realized that our connection was no longer confined to shared moments of grief and sympathy. It had evolved into an undeniable attraction that neither of us could ignore. Before long, our secret meetings grew bolder. In the silence of empty hospital corridors after the night shift, our conversations took on an intimacy that was both thrilling and terrifying. We whispered about our lives, our hidden dreams, and our unspoken desires. Every clandestine encounter was a dance on the edge of disaster, yet I found solace in Nathan's arms. It was a dangerous game we played, one that threatened to unravel the very fabric of our lives. One chilly evening, under the glow of flickering streetlights outside the hospital parking lot, our resolve finally crumbled. I had stepped out for a breath of fresh air after a particularly trying shift when I saw Nathan waiting by the car. The loneliness in his eyes drew me closer, and without a word, we embraced. In that moment, the weight of our hidden secrets melted away, replaced by a reckless intensity. We spent those stolen hours wrapped in a passion that was as freeing as it was forbidden. But with every passionate embrace came the silent echo of guilt. I knew the consequences of crossing that boundary all too well. I was risking not just my professional reputation but also the fragile trust placed in me by Evelyn and her family. Yet, the fire that had been ignited was impossible to extinguish. Each stolen moment became an addictive reprieve from the harsh realities of our lives, a brief escape from the relentless demands of duty and the omnipresent sadness that haunted us both. The more we ventured into this dangerous liaison, the more our meetings grew secretive. I began to arrange my shifts with a subtle precision, ensuring that our encounters remained hidden from prying eyes. I would catch Nathan's gaze in the hallways, and our silent acknowledgments were enough to kindle the passion that simmered beneath the surface. There were times when I would almost believe that, in another life, we might have had a chance at happiness without the heavy burden of secrets and guilt. Yet, every time we came together, a part of me wondered how long we could keep dancing on this precarious tightrope. I could feel the walls closing in, the risk of discovery, the inevitable questions from colleagues, the moral weight of betraying the trust of a family already drowning in sorrow. As I lay awake on restless nights, the taste of our forbidden kisses haunted my dreams, while the shadow of what we were risking loomed large in the daylight hours. I knew then that our path was one of uncertainty. The thrill of the stolen moments was inseparable from the constant fear of exposure. And so, as I embraced the warmth of Nathan's arms under the cover of darkness, I couldn't help but wonder, was the price of this illicit desire worth the inevitable heartache that lay just around the corner? The answer was as murky as the emotions that now defined every facet of my life, and with every clandestine meeting, the line between right and wrong faded further into oblivion. The weight of our secret affair began to crush me. Each day, I woke with a heavy heart, burdened by the knowledge that every glance in the hospital corridor might reveal our hidden truth. What once felt like a forbidden escape now seemed like a trap I could not escape. The passion that had drawn Nathan and me together was slowly giving way to guilt, regret, and the fear of discovery. At work, the familiar hallways of St. Mary's, once my sanctuary, now echoed with whispered rumors and lingering stares. I began to notice colleagues exchanging knowing looks, and the sound of hushed conversations seemed to follow me everywhere I went. My friend and fellow nurse Julia, once full of warm smiles and kind words, now looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. One afternoon, as I was adjusting an 4-drip in a quiet corner, she softly asked, "Is everything all right? You seem distracted." I forced a smile and mumbled an excuse, but her eyes told me she suspected more than I wished to admit. At home, the solitude offered no relief. Night after night, I lay awake on my small bed, haunted by the moments I had shared with Nathan. The stolen kisses, the secret whispers in the dark, all of it now felt like a fragile illusion on the verge of shattering. I kept replaying his voice, the way he had murmured, "We can't keep doing this," during one of our last secret meetings in a deserted corner of the hospital. That moment, so simple yet laden with despair, had signaled that our carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble. Then came the day when the pressure became unbearable. I was on a late shift when I noticed an unfamiliar face lingering near the nurse's station, a young man who seemed out of place among the familiar bustle of the hospital. At first, I brushed it off, telling myself it was just another curious visitor. But by the end of my shift, I overheard whispers that someone had seen Nathan meeting with another person in the empty corridors. My heart pounded with dread as the rumor spread like wildfire among the staff. The realization hit me hard. Our secret was no longer safe. As if the murmurs among my colleagues weren't enough, even Evelyn's fragile world was beginning to show signs of disturbance. During one of my rounds, I caught her looking directly at me with eyes that held a quiet question, a silent inquiry into my own behavior. Her gentle smile, once so full of trust and hope, now wavered uncertainly. Every day, her condition seemed to worsen, and I couldn't help but wonder if my divided attention was taking its toll on her already fragile spirit. The very person I was sworn to care for was now caught in the crossfire of my forbidden desire. One cold, rainy evening, as I finished my shift, I found Nathan waiting by the hospital's back entrance. The downpour blurred the streetlights, and the sound of rain was the only cover for our meeting. His eyes were red-rimmed and troubled, mirroring the storm raging inside me. "We have to stop," he said in a shaky voice. his words almost lost in the howling wind. I hesitated, feeling both the pull of our secret and the crushing weight of what we were risking. The truth was inevitable. The lies, the betrayals, and the heartbreak would soon come crashing down on all of us. Standing there in the cold rain, I felt as though I were on the edge of an abyss. The safe facade of our lives was cracking, and every passing moment threatened to expose the truth. As Nathan and I reluctantly parted ways that night, I couldn't shake the sense of impending doom. I knew that if we did not find a way to undo the damage we had done, the fallout would not only destroy us but also shatter the trust of those we cared for. And so, with each heavy step I took back to my lonely apartment, I wondered, was it already too late to stop this unraveling? After that cold night in the rain, everything began to unravel faster than I could have ever imagined. Each day felt like a descent into a darker part of myself, a constant reminder that the choices I made were not without cost. The thrill of our secret meetings had long since faded, replaced by a heavy burden of guilt and the fear of inevitable consequences. At work, the once familiar hallways of St. Mary's Hospital now carried an oppressive tension. Whispers and sidelong glances from my colleagues cut through the usual hum of hospital activity. I could sense that something was amiss. Rumors of my behavior had spread, and the weight of judgment was nearly unbearable. One afternoon, after a quiet conversation with a concerned coworker, I realized that my once steady world was now in freefall. The guilt of dividing my heart between my duty and a forbidden desire was seeping into every aspect of my life. The situation reached a turning point when Evelyn, the gentle soul I had cared for so tenderly, began to show signs of a deep, unspoken sorrow. I remember one morning, during my rounds, Evelyn reached out with trembling fingers and squeezed my hand, her eyes silently pleading for the unwavering care and attention that she deserved. In that moment, the cost of my distracted attention was laid bare before me. It was as if her quiet, fading strength was a mirror reflecting back the damage I had done, not only to her fragile spirit but to the sanctity of the trust placed in me. Nathan, too, was visibly crumbling under the weight of our choices. The forbidden passion that had once provided him a temporary escape from his grief now left him conflicted and tormented. I recall the anguish in his eyes during one of our last clandestine meetings. "I can't keep living like this," he whispered, his voice cracking with despair. That confession, shared in the secrecy of the hospital's back corridors, marked the beginning of the end for our illicit connection. The dual lives we had led, the one of a grieving husband and the one of a passionate, desperate woman, were colliding with catastrophic force. In the aftermath of that confession, the repercussions came crashing down. My supervisor called me into a private meeting, a conversation laden with unspoken accusations and heavy disappointment. The hospital, once my sanctuary, now felt like a court of silent judgment. I was forced to confront the reality that I had betrayed not only the trust of Evelyn and her family, but also the ethical standards that had guided my career for so many years. The emotional fallout was profound. I began attending therapy sessions to understand the deep-seated loneliness and vulnerabilities that had led me astray. I reached out to Evelyn's family, offering apologies that I knew could never fully mend the broken trust. I even heard from Nathan, his voice now tinged with regret, as he admitted that the affair had not healed his pain but instead magnified it, leaving him more lost than ever before. Yet, amid the sorrow and regret, I discovered a fragile glimmer of hope. In the quiet moments of introspection, I realized that redemption is not an endpoint but a long, uncertain journey. The scars of my actions would always remain, but perhaps they could serve as a lesson, a reminder of the importance of integrity, honesty, and self-forgiveness. I began to devote myself to volunteer work and community service, trying in small ways to make amends for the harm I had caused. I started writing about my experiences, hoping that sharing my story might help others avoid the same pitfalls of forbidden desire and moral compromise. Every day, I wake up to the lingering question: is it possible to find redemption after betraying those who trusted you? The answer, I have come to learn, lies in the acceptance of our mistakes and the courage to grow from them. I know now that forgiveness from others and, most importantly, from myself, is a gradual process. While the pain of my choices will always be a part of me, I am learning to channel that sorrow into a force for positive change. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. A story of passion, betrayal, and the long road toward redemption. If my journey resonated with you, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and helps ensure that these hard-earned lessons continue to reach those who might need them most.